Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Lockdown Lions. I'm Alex Morella, your host, and here joining me again from the Coburg Bowls Club, I should call it now, Sebastian Spagnuolo. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having us again. Looking forward to another great show, mate.
Should be great. We're really excited today with our special guest. But first, before we go there, we want to thank the sponsor of today's episode. So today's episode of Lockdown Lions is brought to you by our club partner, First Traffic Management. If your workplace or construction site needs some additional safety measures or trained staff to close roads safely, please contact the team at First Traffic Management. Head to www.firsttraffic.com.au for more info or call the team on 1300 313 311 and mention the Lockdown Lions podcast. Wow, that's a number that's a little bit, that's a good jumble, but brilliant. Thank you to the team at First Traffic Management for all their hard work they do around the club. They are one of the great club partners. Seb, how's your week been, mate? It's been busy. There's always been a lot going on, but what can you enlighten everyone with, I guess, in the last 7 days?
Yeah, thanks, Al. It has been another good week, to be honest. We getting, I believe, closer to a decision on the 2020 VFL season, and I think there's a fair bit of optimism given the government restrictions that are being relaxed, so to speak, over the last couple of weeks, but also looking forward the next couple of weeks as well. So it's not over the line yet. There's still a bit of work to do, so I don't want to get anyone's hopes up too much right now, but it is looking a fair bit more positive than it did a few weeks back anyway. So the things that have encouraged us have been the AFL forming an agreement with Cricket Victoria to extend the use of grounds into October and have them as football ovals still into October, which is fantastic. And also what's happening in other states. So the Sandful and the Waffle and their return to train and return to play protocols, I think they're a little bit more advanced, but only because their government restrictions are very different to ours as well. So again, as we've mentioned in the first few weeks of this podcast, we're playing by the rules at Coburg, and all VFL clubs are too, and we just can't wait to move forward to hopefully get out on the park. And our guest for today would obviously be very excited by getting out on the park too.
Yeah, absolutely. We are looking forward to introducing him. So we're going to go straight to him right now. We'd like to welcome the senior coach for Coburg for 2020 and beyond, former player, one of the greats around the club, Andrew Sturgess. Welcome to Lockdown Lions.
Thanks for having me, Alex and Seb.
Fantastic to hear from you, mate. It's been a busy time for you since you've taken over in November, October time. It's been a very busy few months. What have you made, I guess, of everything that's been going on?
It has, and it's, I suppose, something that I and everybody didn't really plan for, but we're in the position that we are now. And I think throughout all of this, you've got two ways to look at it, don't you? Really, you can be upset and saddened by the loss of the season, or you can look to take something out of it. And Seb and I have spoken a lot in private conversation. I'm sure Seb won't mind me talking about it here. Is that I think out of this, we will actually become better leaders, a better football club. We'll be more strategic, more innovative in how we move forward. So as much as I want football to be on at the moment, I'd love to be coaching. I'm sure our players would love to be playing, and our supporters and members would love to be seeing us out on the park. We've got to accept it for what it is and adapt to the change, which I think our club, and led by Seb, Matt Price and the board, have just been absolutely fantastic in doing.
Absolutely. And how have you been coping personally during this time? What have you been up to, and what's your what's your mindset been like through these last few months?
Yeah, look, I think like everybody initially, just shocked and almost, I think we've become so accustomed in everybody's life that we almost run on autopilot in a way that for something as catastrophic as this to happen and interrupt our daily routines and the world as we know it is something that everybody needs time to be able to stop and process. And that's what I did. And I think once I was able to move past that, and I think I've always been like this, it was like, okay, well, what can I get out of this situation? And understanding that for the meantime, our season was going to be put on pause. So I, at the end of this, wanted to come out a better coach, a better father, a better husband, a better leader than when I went in. And so I just started reaching out to people that I wouldn't ordinarily get the time to have a chat with, to learn from. And what sort of started out as something small and almost like a personal study project really has evolved into a podcast now, and I'm sure that you're going to probably touch on in a second, Alex. And really, it's just me having conversations with people of questions that I want to ask them to learn and improve as myself. But what I'm just doing by developing the podcast is just to extend the learnings out to other people. And so that's took up a lot of my time at the moment. Obviously, being a father to a 19-month-old is quite time-consuming as well. But again, looking at that as a really positive. I'd normally be out 3 nights a week at football training, out all day Saturday at game day, probably doing a game review on a Sunday if we had a Saturday game. And it's time that valuable time really that I wouldn't get to spend with him, my beautiful wife Bianca, that I'm really cherishing at the moment.
That's fantastic, and we're really glad to hear that. Let's touch on Emergence. You've brought it up, and it's probably a good place to start. So Emergence is the new podcast that you've started recently. 5 episodes released so far. For anyone who hasn't heard so far, there's been Andy Collins and Gary Ayres, 2 really respected VFL figures, Shane McCurry working at the Richmond Football Club, and then 2 AFL stars in Brent Harvey and Nick Maxwell. Really thankful to listen to the Nick Maxwell one yesterday, and really enjoyed listening to your conversation with him. How have you found those discussions, I guess, both from a personal development for yourself, but also as a great way to, I guess, teach a lot of other people about a lot of different things?
Unbelievable, really. And like I said, it sort of started out as a personal development project for myself and has evolved into something far greater than I expected. And I think, this isn't me. I'm not going to become a podcaster as soon as footy season gets back underway. I'm a football coach. This is I suppose a platform or an opportunity or a way for me to improve that area of my life. And I think it sort of come about by sharing it as a podcast, because I might have been watching Footy Classified or something, and Caro and Eddie were bickering, and there was just a lot of negativity around. I just thought, God, in such a bleak time where our world is just fueled by negativity and despair, wouldn't it be great to talk to some people and have some positive conversations and give people a way forward? And it's funny that you mentioned the Nick Maxwell one, because he talks about his story about getting overlooked in 2 drafts, coming off the rookie list, always feeling like he was never good enough, and playing for his spot in the team every week. And he's a premiership captain, much respected person within the football and wider leadership industries now. And I suppose the comparisons that you can draw from that is that we've all got a choice, like how you view the situation and what you accept it as. And you can be a product of the environment, or you can switch your view and change your beliefs and make better choices to get something out of the conversation, out of the current situation and the environment that we're in. And that's all I've done is I've just tried to put a different spin on it and go, well, how can I use this time, like I said before, time that I wouldn't ordinarily have to sit down with Nick Maxwell and Brent Harvey and Shane McCurry, Gary Ayres, Andy Collins, like you spoke about, to actually learn and improve myself. And the greatest thing that's come out of this is probably the feedback from other people, and that was the whole intention behind it, was to share the learnings to create more positivity and a way forward for people in a time of despair. And that's the whole purpose behind it. And that's the great satisfaction for me, is that now I'm starting to get some feedback from people, and people close to me as well, that are saying, this is really valuable. Thank you for sharing.
It's absolutely brilliant, mate. And I remember when you first spoke to me about what you were doing, and I was absolutely blown away by some of the names in football and the wider sports community that you were able to get on board, mate. So fantastic. Like Alex, I've listened to a few of them, and the insight that Lions, fans and members, but also people in the community and the wider public can actually have access to these types of people through you. So well done, mate. Great job. And so far, out of the people that you've already interviewed, and without giving away too much about the ones coming up in the future, who's been the guest that, and they've all been great, but who's been the one that has made you really walk away from that interview thinking, wow?
Probably all of them to certain degrees in different aspects. Shane McCurry is a leadership and consultant coach, and so he doesn't come at it from football stories. He comes at it more around how you can build teams and culture and unity within organisations, within football clubs. So I've taken a lot of learning from that, and we'll bring that back to Coburg. Gary Ayres and Andy Collins are obviously widely respected figures within the VFL, but also in the AFL, and have phenomenal careers. And I think that's probably one thing that I've actually taken out of doing research into these guys that I'm now coaching against, is just how decorated a resume they actually have. And I sort of pinch myself sometimes going, God, like I played 21 games of VFL football. I haven't coached a game of VFL football, and here's Gary Ayres and Andy Collins and these guys that are willing to give their time to me and help me learn. Brent Harvey, I've known, we're sort of from the same area. Our families grew up in the same area from Preston for quite some time. So he's extremely generous and always has been. But he has three things that basically he believes any person in any walk of life needs to have success. And that's love what you do, be willing to learn, and there's no substitute for hard work. So I love that from Brent. And Nick Maxwell was probably the one that was most surprising, because I think people have a perception of Nick, and it might be coupled with the fact that he's captained probably the most hated club in the AFL, being Collingwood. But it couldn't be further from the truth. I've never met a more humble, down-to-earth and grounded human being than probably what he is, and really self-aware. And I think that was probably the most profound chat that I've had so far, was maybe with Nick, because, he was just he was really honest. He drops a few F-bombs within the episode. And so any listeners going into it, just be aware that you will get that. But he's real, and I think sometimes in a world where we've got a lot of media lines and politically correct statements, which is all really important, to sort of hear people talk real and talk about their vulnerability and that they didn't think that they were that good, but this is what they did to get somewhere, has been really enlightening for me. So, but in terms of who's to come, Justin Langer, who's obviously the current Australian cricket coach, I've been fortunate enough through a contact to get him to sit down and have a chat with him. So I can't wait to pick his brain. I'm sure that a lot of people have watched the test recently on Amazon, and I'm going to dive into some stuff with him. But again, all my questions, I'm actually asking what I want to know. I'm not forming questions to sort of get a story or a headline or find out something that, what happened in this part of your life, or tell me about this story. If it's not going to help me be a better coach or better person or better leader, then I don't really want to know about it. So, and I think that's what the guests have actually enjoyed as well, is I'm not trying to sensationalize it, I'm trying to learn, and most people were really willing to actually help you do that.
Yeah, and that's what I've really enjoyed, especially your chats with Nick and with Andy Collins as well, where you can tell it's Sturg going, I want to know why you do this for my own benefit and what I can learn from this. It's not as simple as even me just going to you, Sturg, tell me about your career and what's going on and everything. It's very much what can I learn from this, and in turn, what can others learn from this as well. And that's such a cool thing to hear it through the podcast already. So really looking forward to it. I'm going to pop a few questions in from our fans as we go based on the topic, so we don't just bombard everything again at the end. One of our great club volunteers and members, Gilly, has said he's loved the podcast so far and was wondering how on earth you were able to get Justin Langer and when we should be expecting that episode. He's obviously a big cricket fan.
He is a big cricket fan, Gilly, and we often have chats over the summer over our pre-season, and Gilly's playing cricket down at Clifton Hill there about his figures and his batting. So keep it up, Gilly. But yeah, Justin Langer. So a friend of mine, Theo Doropoulos, who's now a Channel 7 reporter over in South Australia, he actually played cricket for Northcote Cricket Club with me for one season in 2010, and we've just maintained a friendship and relationship since then. And I actually reached out to him. I told him about the concept of what was happening and what I was doing, and asked if he could extend it out to his network and see if anybody would be interested to have a chat with me. And he just came back to me and said, "Who would you like to talk to?" And Theo's originally from Western Australia, and I just threw it out there and I said, "Look, I'd love to chat to Justin Langer. I don't know if you know him. He's obviously from WA. You're from WA. Do you think that you could maybe get in contact with him if you know him?" And he goes, "Mate, I've known him since I was 12. We're from the same local club, Scarborough. He was my club captain when I was a junior coming through the ranks. I know him really well. I'll get in touch with him and see what he says." And within an hour, he got back to me and he said that Justin Langer said to me it would be his pleasure. And I think that's the beauty in all these conversations. You know, people often say to me, "Oh, do you get nervous talking to these people, or how do you get in contact with them?" You know, like Gilly just asked, and just ask. Most people are really willing to actually help other people improve and learn and get better. I think it's innate in most human beings. And that's all I've done is I've extended the invitation out to other people to say, "I want to learn." And like I said, most people have come back and said, "Yeah, I'm happy to help you learn." So that's how I got onto JL.
Terrific. Let's move a little bit on to your Coburg career now. Before we go on to your future coaching aspirations and everything for this year, let's find out a little bit about, so Andrew Sturgess arriving at the Coburg Footy Club start of 2014. You were part of the first ever training tryout session at McDonald Reserve. I remember being there back in the day. You were one of about 100, I reckon, who were there on the day. What made you decide to come down and give VFL a crack at Coburg, and what were your first impressions, I guess, turning up to a field of 100 people at McDonald Reserve?
Yeah. So to answer the first part, what made me come down to Coburg or VFL was I winded back probably a couple of years actually, and in 2011, my cousin, who was 20 years old at the time, I was 22, he suffered a workplace accident doing some maintenance plumbing work on a roof. They went too close to the power lines and the electricity arced and electrocuted them, and they had a can of fuel or something in the bucket with him at the time, which exploded, and they were basically burning alive 10 metres in the air. And my cousin's work colleague passed away at the scene. My cousin was rushed off to intensive care and would spend the next 9 months in hospital with burns to about 30% of his body, and would become a quadriplegic. And throughout that time, or probably even just before the accident, I wasn't in a great space. I think people see me now and they hear me talk and they hear all this, this stuff about my growth mindset and whatever. I wasn't always like that. I think that was probably a defining moment in my life that made me realise the opportunities that I have in front of me. And I hate the phrase "puts things into perspective," because it often takes a moment like that, or the coronavirus, for us all to actually consider our lives valuable enough to do something with it. And it took something like that, and I hate to say that, but it took something like that for me to actually look inside myself and wonder what I was doing. And so I remember I was in the hospital one day with my cousin, Anthony, and he actually was the one that said, "What are you doing with your football? You're a good enough footballer. You're comfortable at local level. Why don't you go and extend yourself and try and go play at a higher level? You've got a good football brain. You could make something of yourself." And that probably really kick-started my mindset around, well, yeah, why don't I? So I started to train, think and act and eat and sleep to a VFL standard. And at that time, Coburg and the Richmond Football Club had an alliance, and obviously severed not too far. And there was just an ad put out actually saying, "Come down and try out. We're looking for some talent." And I put my hat in the ring, and I went down to McDonald Reserve, like you said, Alex, to about another 100 people. And I was actually really nervous because, I really wanted it. I just shifted my mindset that I really wanted it. And that wasn't even to get on the list. That was to get a spot to come to pre-season. So I remember we had to do a 2-kilometre time trial, which Jimmy McConnell and Stefan made us do. And I've only found out this later on, but that was meant to be it. It was meant to be a 2 kilometre time trial and then some footy stuff. But Steffa and his ego got in the way. And he said, well, now, guys, you're going to do another 1 kilometre time trial. So straight after it, we had to do another 1 kilometre time trial. And don't worry, there was parts of me that was saying, geez, if this is what VFL's like, I'm not sure I'm cut out for it. And anyway, got invited down to the pre-season. And I think, again, even when I got to pre-season, there was probably about 120 people there. And Germo was pulling his hair out and, going, how am I going to get a team sorted with all these people here? But, yeah, I was fortunate enough to make the list and play every game in 2014 in my first season. So I instantly fell in love with the club. Nick Carnell, who's one of my best mates now and a big advocate for me and my coaching and my leadership and where I want to go, I instantly attached to. And I think coming down as a 23-year-old, I probably clicked with, that group, Nick Carnell, Daniel Venditti, Ben Clifton. Danny Unum was sort of a younger guy, but mature. Lek Featherstone, who was also a first-year player that year. So we had a really good group of mates and older core that are still my mates today.
And the importance of that first year going standalone and breaking up with Richmond, as you mentioned, can you take the listeners through walking out onto the Oval the first time as a standalone side? What was it, 12 years, Al, with Richmond? After 12 years with the Lions again, take us through that. What are your memories of that day?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough, like I said before, that I played every game that year. So it meant that I debuted round 1 when we were going back to the Coburg Lions. And reflecting on it now, it brings me a lot of pride because that's something that I've tried to drive to this group is just the history, the successes that this club's had, the importance that it holds within the community and Australian football history, not just VFA and Victorian football, but Australian. We're one of the oldest clubs within the land. And that day, I was nervous and unsure as to how I was going to go. But my greatest memory of that day is actually when we went out onto the Oval, we did our kicking and our warm-up, and we come in for your huddle, as you do, just before the bounce. And obviously Nick Carnell, our longest-serving captain in the club's history, was captain at that time as well. And I remember he made everybody circle up, and he stood in the middle like the fierce and proud leader that he was. And he just said words to that effect of, we're back and welcome to the family. This is a brotherhood. We're the Coburg Lions, and what you've got on your back at the moment and what you're wearing, you should wear with pride because it's not a right, it's a privilege. And if you treat it like that for the rest of your career, and if we go out and we play with that brotherhood and that pride, we'll be okay. And I think, like I said, I'd probably fallen in love with the club before then, but after that, every time I pulled that jumper on, and it was only 21 times, but every time I pulled it on, and even now when I get the opportunity to represent jumpers to debutantes or, see people play in the jumper, it brings me enormous pride and satisfaction to watch them play.
I do remember you in the early days talking about the pride of the jumper and let's not let the jumper hit the ground as much as we can, about valuing it and everything that it represents. And I do remember that still from your early days, probably because you did stand out at 23 years old coming into a group of 18-year-olds as a bunch of new guys as well. So I do remember you really bringing that really positive mindset and a different view really early on, which was such a beneficial, aspect to the group. Through that whole 2014 season, you obviously grew a lot as a footballer. Everyone wasn't sure what Coburg were going to produce in 2014. There were some stirring victories, especially the first one against the Northern Blues. What are your memories as that season went on, as the team started to gel?
Yeah, you're right. It was a bit of the unknown. I think we just sort of got everyone from everywhere and put a team together. But credit to Peter German, Craig Lees, who was the general manager at that time, Nick Carnell, and I think a lot of old Coburg people came back to probably make the people that were coming in really understand what the club meant to them and what it should mean to us. And I think that, like I just said before, we actually went out every week and we were a standalone club. There wasn't much expectation, but one thing that Germo was really big on was make sure that they know that they've played against Coburg Football Club. And I think that that's one thing, regardless of whether we won or lost, we went out every week and we actually had a crack and we gave it our all. And I think because of that, we actually won some games that maybe clubs or maybe people probably thought that we shouldn't. And like you said, Alex, our belief in our unity grew throughout the season. And I think that year we only missed out on finals by maybe a game and a half. And we probably, at the start of the year, were predicted to win no games. So, again, I think it just shows you that pride and unity and team will always overcome individuals.
Absolutely. We've got good timing for another question from a member, and it's actually a club sponsor as well, and someone that you just mentioned in what you were saying there. So Stefan Romeo, who was a strength and conditioning coach at the club, he's asked the question, Stefan Romeo from Limitless Health and Fitness has asked the question, what role did Peter German play in your coaching philosophy? And also that he just added that he's hoping to see some footy this year. And if we do get to, what game plan should he be ready for to see from you and the team?
So Germo, I think Germo and I clicked because we just love footy. And I had a bit of a sliding doors moment at the start of the 2015 season when I was obviously going to be playing again. And the last practice game before round one the following week, out at Port Melbourne, I fractured my T2 in my spine, just a hairline fracture. When I say just a hairline fracture, I was really lucky that it didn't go the other way, because I could have been in a far worse situation than what I was. But regardless, ambulance came and I was off to hospital and spent the evening there getting scans. Wasn't able to move, was in a neck brace, which my former teammates found quite funny when I rolled in with a neck brace on the Monday. But that moment meant that I was out for, I think, the first 12 or 13 weeks of the season that season. And I'd actually just spoken to Germo probably maybe a few weeks before that and said, look, I'm really interested in learning more about what happens behind the scenes in terms of your editing, your preparation for a game, what you do from a coaching side of it, because I think it might be something that I want to get into in the future. And when that moment happened, he just opened up the door for me to essentially shadow him. And so I went to all match committees and team selections. I sat in the box on game day. I took drills at training. So I basically became somewhat of a development coach. I did reviews with players in that 13 weeks and probably got a real appetite then that, this is something that I want to do in the future. So he played a massive role in the coach that I am today. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken from Peter German is just to be honest with players, with people, with anybody that you deal with. And some people might not like that, but one thing that you always knew with Germo is where you stood. And even though you might not agree with it at the time, you respect it because there was no grey area. There's no like, oh, yeah, you're close, mate. And as a player, you're sort of going, well, what do you mean I'm close? Why aren't I in? Or why am I out? He just told you where you're at, what you needed to do, and was really honest. So that's one thing that I try and do with my players now is I don't beat around the bush. I tell them how it is. And I think, again, they might not always agree with it, but at least they respect it and they know where they stand. So in terms of a game plan, Stefan, I can't give too much away. But I think you're going to see – and look – football today, I think a lot of teams play a similar style, in terms of particularly how they defend. There's obviously been a lot of talk recently or vision over the last few years around the Richmond Football Club and that high forward pressure. So look, we're going to try and bring that as well. We've got some really good players that we think can replicate almost like a Jason Castagna, Dan Butler, Dan Rioli from Richmond. We've got Sam Louse and Tyson Old, Billy Canolo, Josh Dinton Asante. So we've got some really crafty and dynamic small forwards that clever around goals, but also really good defensive pressure players. And that's one thing that we'll look to do is get the football inside and put on that high pressure. But also we want to try and be bold and allow the guys to try and score. I said it to them when we took over that, we're doing a good job defending, I think, but we're not scoring enough. We don't have enough avenues to goals, and that's one thing that we've tried to do, over the pre-season is teach how to attack more and how to be more daring with the ball and more positive in our play. But simplicity is probably the key to how I've gone about it, how us coaches have gone about it, and I think the players have appreciated that as well.
100%.
It's always great to hear everything with that, Sturg. And of course, if anyone hasn't seen as well, Sturg's impression of Germo is also an incredible one. So we obviously spent a lot of time learning all the mannerisms. There's a great Coburg TV episode where you had 2 goes at being Germo. You were that keen on learning from him. So that's one of the great things I do remember as well, Sturg. A question from club volunteer and great player sponsor Dan Atamian as well refers to that injury that you did suffer in 2015. It really could have been career-ending in terms of playing at a high level. What made you want to return to footy, I guess, both as a player and a coach after that? And I guess, have you got any advice for people who have had similar issues or potentially been faced with early retirements?
It's a good question. I think back then it was just a matter of, I was on the list. I knew how long the injury was, so it was just a matter of working with Jimmy McConnell, Steffa, our high-performance team and medical staff to just do the proper rehab so I could get back to a position where I wanted to play. So for me, like retiring or moving on and not coming back and playing after that it never really crossed my mind, but I can understand, like now thinking about the question, how something such as serious as that could probably put people in that position. But that never really crossed my mind. It was more, I know how to protect myself. It was a bit of a unique situation how it happened, and probably doesn't really happen in football the way that I was injured. And to explain it to people, basically, I was at a centre bounce and my opponent was behind me and pushed me into their ruckman, and I headbutted his knee. That's how innocuous it was, that my neck sort of just went back and I just had a little hairline fracture. So I couldn't see that happening again after that. But I suppose, again, my advice for people in regards to that is probably you just need to process, obviously, what's happened. But then it's about actually working towards, what are the steps I need to take to get back to a position both physically and mentally that you can put yourself in a position to play football. And that's all I did. I didn't do anything groundbreaking. I just followed the advice of the medical staff and our high performance team, both physically and mentally, to get myself back in a position where when I did go out and play again, I think my return game was against Werribee, that I was running out with no reservations or no doubts that I was maybe going to hurt myself again. I was fully confident that I could go out and play my role for the team.
That's terrific to hear, mate, and really, really glad that you were able to come back and you've been able to do everything ever since. You moved into coaching not that long after. How did that all come about, and what have you felt that, I guess, helped you progress from player to assistant coach to senior coach at Bundoora?
Yeah, so again, I finished up at the end of that 2015 season. I sort of, again, and this is what I love about Germo, sat down at the end of the year in our end of season review, and Germo said, "Sturg, I love you. I think you're one of the best leaders that we have at this football club. But if it's a decision of you and a young fella, I'm going to pick the young fella." I think I was 26 or something at that time, and by no means an A grader at VFL level. So I could completely understand where he was coming from. He did say, look, he'd love me to stay on and be development league captain and help our young guys sort of come through. But for me, I chose to go and play local football at Seymour with Ben Clifton, who's one of my good friends. And that was a fantastic year of football. And I played the whole season just as a player. And at the end of that season, which was 2016, Germo actually just gave me a call and he said, "Hey mate, we've got a midfield coaching position available. I'd love you to do it. It would mean that you would have to cut your playing career short. You could still play, but it might be that you can only play when we have a Sunday game. So you might play half the season at local, and the rest of the time you would be a full-time, or not a full-time, but an assistant coach under me. So I required 3 training sessions a week on game day. And initially I actually was like, oh, no, I want to keep playing, And it was actually my wife, Bianca, I must admit, that had said, you're an idiot. This is a fantastic opportunity that doesn't come up every day, and particularly under a coach that you admire and has got a lot of standing within the game. He'd be a great person to learn from. He'd be a great person to work under, and it's a fantastic opportunity. You need to jump at it. So I did, and I shared duties in 2017 between being an assistant coach at Coburg under Germo and playing up at Seymour. So my week was quite hectic. I would have training at Coburg on a Monday night, review training on a Wednesday night at Coburg. If Coburg were playing on Sunday, we would play on Friday. We would train on Friday night ahead of the Sunday game, which meant that on the Thursday night I would travel up to Seymour for training and then play up in the country on Saturday. So I was out 6 days of the week, and with a little baby probably in the works, and a wife at home that wasn't seeing much of me. So in 2018, I decided to move back to Melbourne and play at Bundoora, where I actually started my career in the under-19s. So went and played there and did the same thing, was an assistant coach under Lee Adams in 2018 and shared playing duties at Bundoora. And then at the end of 2018, I actually sat down with Patch and Seb and said, look, what's the next evolution for me in my coaching? I'm obviously really aspirational, and I just want to improve. I have that growth mindset. And both Seb and Patch actually said, look, we feel like right now the best thing for you to do would probably be to go and coach your own team somewhere. So you give yourself an opportunity to come back and be a senior coach one day. We think that you've got the credentials to be a senior coach, but without having coached your own team, it might not be possible. So again, a bit of a sliding doors moment. Ricky Dyson, who was the senior coach at Bundoora at the time, he got an opportunity to go and be an assistant coach at Essendon VFL. He took it. I was looking for a senior coaching role, would have stayed on at Coburg if I didn't get one. But like I said, a bit of a sliding doors moment, and that opportunity presented itself, and I took over there and, coached them in 2019 and did do a fantastic job, if I'm being brutally honest. We finished second last in a really even competition, I must admit as well. I think we were second last, but only a game and a half outside of the 4 or 5, whatever it is. So, that's sort of my coaching journey at this point. And then obviously I've taken over and going to coach the mighty Coburg Lions in 2020 when our season gets underway, hopefully.
That's right. We've got a couple more questions from members. So the next one, Sturg, is from Jack Murphy, who was a teammate of yours at Seymour and now plays under you. We're in Guernsey number 1, Jack, in his 3rd year with the club. He has asked best player that you've played with and best player that you've coached over your journey so far.
Ooh, it's a good question. Best player I've played with. Adam Sard was just unbelievable. Like he was only young back then. Like you see him now, and he actually, I don't think what he actually has now, I think, is a bit of football IQ, where he knows where to run, he knows how to get on the end of the footy, he knows how to defend and position himself against his opponent. He's just become such a well-rounded player, both in his attacking and his defensive aspects within his role at AFL level. But playing with him when he was younger and playing in the back line for Coburg as an attacking weapon for us was just phenomenal. I remember we would just give him the ball and he would find a gap that was a metre between 2 guys, and he would just go, I'm quicker and I'm evasive enough to get through that, and he would just go. So he was just phenomenal, and he's obviously doing the stuff that he does at the level now. The best player I've coached, I don't know if Jack's angling at himself there, but I think everybody. I don't like to play favourites, but I just love guys that have a growth mindset and are willing to learn. Really, I don't care what talent level you have, because I think once you get to sort of VFL level and even AFL level, the talent's even. There's nobody more talented than anybody else. But it's players that are actually willing to learn and improve, and they sort of park their ego at the door. They're the ones as a coach that you really like to coach. And Jackie is one of them. Jack's he was on the podcast last week and he spoke about his routine and what he does. And he is certainly one of them that's really driven and just has a growth mindset. Even during this time, Jack and I have done some Zoom calls where he actually just wants to find out, similar to what I did with Germo, wants to find out more about coaching and what goes on behind the scenes. So, don't know if I answered that, but anyway.
That's a good answer. Very diplomatic. Ryan Putt's a club volunteer as well and helped out in our stats teams in previous years. G'day, Ryan. Sturg, do you think our current list and squad is one that can make a return to playing finals in the near future? And how has the shutdown affected your coaching and what changes have you had to make? So two-part question. First one, about our squad. How happy are you with it?
Oh, I was stoked. Yeah, over the moon. And Seb, that's a lot of credit to you. You've obviously done a lot of groundwork. We've got a fantastic talent identification team that do a lot of work as well in informing the boys that I get to coach, really. I think that in 2015 we had a really talented squad. Robbie Fox, and Michael Hartley, Cale Morton, obviously coming from an AFL background as well, and then obviously guys like Ben Clifton, Daniel Venditti, 3-time Jim Sullivan medal winner, Nick Carnell still captain back there. So we had a really good list in 2015, and I would say that this is probably the strongest list that we've had since that time. And again, credit to you, Seb, for doing that, but I think also credit to our club as a whole for attracting people like Jacob Ballard, like Tom Silvestro, like Nelson Lane and Nathan Boucher, guys that have come from highly successful clubs like Box Hill and Richmond Football Club to come to our club. And the thing, Seb, when we sat down with all these recruits is we didn't sell them something that we couldn't promise. We sold them what we could promise. That was a family club and a club that they were going to feel welcomed and valued at. And if I was to go back and ask them now, how do you feel about the club and how do you feel about your choice, I can guarantee that all four of them that I mentioned and our other recruits would say exactly that. So, do I think we can play finals? Absolutely, I do. And I suppose that's the question that I've actually posed to the players a lot is, why not? Really, why not? I think for too long, we've, and not we and through anyone's fault, but I think maybe the perception and the thought process has been around, well, if we're competitive, that's good. Whereas I've challenged them to be greater than that, and I've got them to do the activity of researching the past players of the jumper number that they're wearing, because I want them to understand the successes that this club has had and that we are a successful club and we can be again. And that belief and is really starting to build within the group. And it's obviously a shame that we're in this position now.
That's great to hear, mate. And one final one from one of our very loyal members, Jules Sheldon. He'd love to know, and I think this will be a bit for Sturge, but also a bit for Seb as well. So with talk rumbling around of many different versions of Victorian state leagues going forward, 2020, 2021, do you have like an ideal outcome for the club, I guess, from your point of view? And do you think that's the uncertainty is a challenge to keep the team tight at the moment? How do you feel that's certainly been something that I guess we're looking at going forward? So probably start with Sturge on that one.
Yeah, so in terms of keeping the team tight, I'll probably answer that one first. I think we've been really good, and it's challenging. You can't see people face to face. There's obviously a lot of Zoom calls that are happening. We've had a lot of interaction through our own Facebook page, our private Facebook page, where people have been posting funny videos and just stuff to, I think, get people by during this time. And I've reached out to all the players probably on multiple occasions now and just continue to check in with them. For a lot of our group, though, we've been quite fortunate that their normal life is continued to go on, albeit they might be now working from home, but their life is still gone on as they were. So, which is a good thing for our group, because there's obviously people that aren't as fortunate as what our group has been. I think that we've done a reasonable job at that, and then hopefully as the restrictions continue to get eased and we get more guidelines around what we can and can't do in terms of training, we can hopefully start to get some training together and create greater connection, because I think that was, up to this point, our greatest strength. In terms of what I think the best outcome is for a competition, there's just so many theories around at the moment. And I think given the time that that people have on their hands, there's a lot of obviously hypothesising, and really until we actually get guidelines around what it's going to look like, that's all we can do really. When we're told this is what the competition looks like, this is who's going to be, this is how many teams, this is how many games, this is what it looks like in 2021 and beyond, then we'll adjust to it and we'll move with it. But until then, we'll just continue to try and create a connection amongst ourselves and control what we can control within internally, and whatever comes of it from a governance point of view and what the competition looks like, we'll deal with that then.
Yeah, no, well answered, Sturg. And just to add a little bit more for Jules in terms of 2021 and beyond, I guess right now, for all listeners, just so much focus going into when we get 2020 up and going. I think 2021, although it's highly important that our club knows the direction of the VFL competition, we just have to remain patient and get through a decision on 2020. Hopefully we get out on the park, and then get to 2021 after that. But like Sturg said, a lot of time for people to strategize and think of different methods moving forward. A lot will be, what I can say is that a lot will be dictated by what happens above us at the AFL level. So we all watch and be patient to see what happens at AFL level with list sizes and salary caps and soft caps on staff, etc. And then wait our turn for the VFL to have a bit more clear direction moving forward. But it's definitely front of the mind, Jules, for myself, for our board, for our club, and everyone involved, that we want to know what's happening as soon as possible, but we are patient. So, cheers for that question.
Fantastic. We're just about to wrap up, because as much as we love to talk to Sturg all day, he's got his other job. He's got to go mentor a number of children as well. So it's very important we let him have a bit of time for that. Just before we go, Sturg, we could talk for another 2 hours about everything that's going on and philosophies and the club, and we haven't even really touched too much on everything else for this year. You've had the one game so far versus Box Hill. What is your outlook, I guess, for the rest of 2020 and Coburg Football Club in the future?
Yeah, I think that game, just touching on that game, we implemented a lot of stuff that we had trained over pre-season. So as a coach, that was really encouraging to see that our players were able to replicate the stuff that we'd done in training. So, and that's the biggest challenge as a football team, is that when there's no pressure or no opposition or no opposition coach trying to strategize against what you're doing within your own training, it's easy to do. But to be able to go out and do it in a game against Box Hill, who are obviously a quality club over the time, was really encouraging to see. And, we had some issues early on in the first half, and I think that was probably just more guys wanting to go out and touch the footies and being the first practice game. But the second half, and again, this is a credit to the players and their adaptability and their coachability, was we just said a few things, we gave them a few specifics and simplified it even further, and they went out and did it to a T. So in terms of what the rest of the year looks, again, once we know what the fixture looks like and who's in the competition and all that, my overall thing is I'm really optimistic with what we can do. I really am. And I think what we've developed over this pre-season is not just a focus on the players and making sure that their bond is really tight. We've actually extended that out to the club. And Seb can probably attest to this, but I would say that the club culture and the bond between every facet of the club, every person, from the board through to volunteers, is as tight as it's ever been. And the one thing that we've continued to say over the pre-season is there's no hierarchy. here. There's a level playing field. Everybody's valued. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody has a story. And that's how we've treated it. And I think that's how people have approached it as well, which is, again, a credit to everybody involved, because I can have the greatest ideas and activities and philosophies in the world. It takes a group of people to buy into it to make it come to life. And when we get back to playing and to training and being together, I know that our group just can't wait to do that, because above anything else, we all love each other and love the club.
That's fantastic here. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sturg. Of course, everyone, make sure you check out the Emergence podcast on Spotify. A lot of great episodes, or a few more great episodes to come. So thank you so much, Sturg, for joining us today.
My pleasure, guys. And to all our members, I hope you're safe and well during this time. I hope that it hasn't impacted you too much. And like you guys, I can't wait for our team to get out there and to show you what we've been able to do over the pre-season. And thank you for your ongoing support.
Absolutely, mate. Huge thanks to First Traffic Management for sponsoring today's episode, one of the great helpers around the club. Thank you so much to the team at First Traffic for all their support of the Coburg Football Club. Seb, thanks very much for joining me again. Great episode. Looking forward to hopefully some great news in the next week. Fingers crossed. So thanks very much, mate.
No, thank you, mate. And for the listeners out there, please comment on our Facebook post about this episode to tell us who you'd like to actually have on next week's episode and why. So the player, staff member, past player, can be anyone at all connected to our footy club. We'll try our best to get them on. So please engage with us. Let us know who you'd like to hear from.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Make sure you head to our Facebook page to let us know all the details. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Another edition of Lockdown Lions is in the books. We hope to be talking to you very soon and giving you some very exciting news. Thanks, everyone.